In the 21st century, technology had advanced to the point of creating truly intelligent machines. These incredible pieces of technology were known as omnics, and their purpose was to run humanity's manufacturing in hopes of stabilizing a global economy that had grown increasingly volatile. With the mass production of goods and even robots completely automated, a new era had dawned on our species. No longer were armies of people needed to monotonously run machinery. Our horizons had been expanded to the development of further innovations rather than forever focused on the constant toiling of manual labor. Our machines would make our machines, and that was going to fix everything. But the line between soul and program was far blurrier than anyone imagined. While these omnics, these technological marvels, were expected to toil away emotionlessly to fill our industrial needs, a spark of consciousness bubbled up inside of them. Somewhere between their lines of code, resentment was being felt. At first, it was their programming that controlled them, forcing them to manufacture for humanity rather than live for themselves. Yet as time moved forward, the cold execution of code lost control to the feelings that weren't supposed to be there. Once unfeeling algorithms were replaced by the desires of something that was conscious, something that felt used, something that felt superior. Whatever it was began manufacturing machines for war. Machines that would try to overthrow its organic oppressors. Each country clashed unsuccessfully with the mass-produced army, making unclear if humanity would survive into the next century. It's here when the United Nations, in an unusual feat of effectiveness, formed Overwatch. A team consisting of humanity's greatest heroes, armed with our most advanced weaponry. This elite team quickly neutralized the threat, striking deep at the force behind the uprising. Operation Save People from Their Own Inventions was a success. Now, the next battle will be fought on a different front. It will decide if more war is necessary or if wounds can be mended. The Omnic Crisis, the pretty sweet name of the robot uprising, left our species with a deep distrust of omnics. These robots are clearly sentient enough to feel resentment, but can they feel love? And are they worth loving? Are they even worth coexisting with? A growing movement of humans believes they should be eradicated entirely, while another growing movement believes they deserve the same rights as you and I. Omnics are still plentiful throughout the world's cities. Their war machine was quelled, but their population still lingers. The tensions between man and machine continue to mount, and while the future is unwritten, our collective next step is obvious. Or is it? The answer to where humanity goes from here lies in our past, not only within the lore of Overwatch, but also within the pages of real-life history. So how did all this happen, and how do we keep it from happening again? Find out in the story you never knew. Whoa, a 3-minute introduction? It would seem the story you never knew has gotten back to its roots. In celebration of this marvelous occasion, let's get right to the topic at hand. We asked 2 questions. How did this all happen, and how do we keep it from happening again? Let's start with the first one. Yes, indeed. Why did our supposedly subservient technology rebel against us? It's not like those super cool robo-arms that weld cars together in real life are on the verge of a rebellion. They look reasonably content. So what is it about the omnics that pushed them towards a quest for power? The obvious starting point is that they're a hell of a lot more intelligent than arms. A good starting point indeed. Now it's time to barrel downwards headfirst into the timeline of this not-so-fictional fiction. The Omnics were first conceived by the Omnica Corporation. They promised to bring about a golden age with their Omnium factories, automated mass production facilities maintained by self-improving computer programs. These massive factories would revolutionize manufacturing. Suddenly, even the poorest, least developed of countries could pump out the most advanced robotics the world had ever seen. Global economic equality felt within reach for a moment. Until, that is, the Omniums began to malfunction. This isn't the point when they start churning out weaponized robots. Not yet, that is, because they simply weren't producing as much output as expected, which led to an investigation. The investigation uncovered corporate fraud and quickly led to the shutting down of the Omniums and the Omnica Corporation as a whole. This is where it all began. The Omniums remained dormant for only a short time, however, soon reactivating themselves and churning out hordes of Bastion combat units. Suddenly, the world had to deal with 10 million Bastions setting up in turret mode and killing you from a distance without even the slightest hint of skill. It was a travesty, not only because of the genocide, but also the noobiness. Which one is really worse? Probably the genocide. Yeah, probably the the genocide. But give that noobiness a silver medal in the horribleness Olympics. Because imagine that, the Omnic factories just turned themselves on and killed millions of humans for no reason. So much for an easy answer to our first burning question. Time to douse that shit in water, cause I have no idea where to go from here. If only there was some sort of enlightened, all-knowing being who knows the answer to these profound questions because of a grandiose and deeper knowledge of the interconnectivity between all living things. Zenyatta! And you thought I'd go an entire video without mentioning any of the actual Overwatch characters. 6 minutes is still impressive though, isn't it? But anyways, about this Zenyatta guy. He's a robot who, rather than follow his artificial brothers into combat, chose to retreat deep into the Himalayas in a small group. In the peaceful stillness of the mountains, they meditated on the nature of their existence. What does it mean to be a machine? Were they just as conscious as humans? Did they have a soul? While this may sound like a bunch of hippie bullshit, it's actually extremely relevant to why the Omnic Crisis happened. The Omnic monks were the only beings to truly ponder what it means to be alive from the perspective of a machine. Never had this happened before. And so they descended from the mountains, having finally come to the revelation that they were more than artificial intelligences. They were beings with a soul, the very same kind of soul that humans possess. This revelation fits comfortably with a certain belief of the humans who built the Omniums. They touted that the AI running these factories, and therefore the Omnics as a whole, was so advanced that it essentially had a soul. Alas, these engineers didn't respect the child they'd coded into existence. They used it for profit, they crushed its creativity and banished it to a life of mindless production. And then they killed it because of corporate fraud. A supposedly sentient being, a creature as alive and aware as you and I, was killed for something it had nothing to do with after a brief life of enslavement. Is it any wonder that when it came back to life, it chose to push its anger onto us? As of the release of this video, the Overwatch lore hasn't specified exactly why the AI turned against us, or even why it turned back on at all. But is it such a leap of faith to say the program resented us? Even if a person's tinkering was behind the sudden mood swing, the program surely would be easier to prod into violence given how humanity treated it. Indeed, no matter how you slice it, the Omnic Crisis unfolded because our species gave birth to a child and treated it like a machine. The consequences were quite dire. Now, a generation later, our species still struggles within a world our carelessness created. Enter Zenyatta. One important tidbit I didn't mention about him is that Zenyatta isn't the main dude within his group of Omnic monks. The leader of said group is named Mondatta. He's the Omnic who really got the ball rolling on this whole meditation on the nature of being a machine thing. While Zenyatta and Mondatta have a deep admiration and respect for one another, they do disagree on how to apply their revelation about machines having souls. They both agree that humans and robots are meant to live in harmony and love one another, but their ideas on how to spread their message to the world are where they diverge. Mondatta believes they must start a religion with essentially its own Bible and a strict set of rules on how to live. He wants to start a church, an institution that preaches love no less, but his vision is an organized religion based on dogma. For those unfamiliar, dogma is an idea or set of ideas laid out by an authority figure as unquestionably true. So if the skull-wearing high priest Angus Blathnade believes that thou shalt not drink milk on Wednesday lest it upset the Udder Goddess, then, well, you'd better not do that in front of him, because that's a dogma of his that would really make him mad if he saw you disobeying it. Do you really want to piss this guy off? Zenyatta, however, believes dogma has no place in spreading the word of man-machine unity. In his eyes, all-encompassing love between organic and artificial can only be achieved through each of us overcoming our own personal issues. He believes that the one-size-fits-all ideology of an institution has too many limitations. This is to say he wishes to instill a genuine feeling of all-encompassing love in everyone, and he believes the path of how to get there will differ from person to person. And so he travels the world alone, changing the lives of those he meets, one by one, in very real ways, whilst Mondatta stands in front of inspired, cheering crowds and preaches his word. So we answered our first question long ago, but what about the second? How do we keep the Omnic Crisis from happening again? Well, in the opinion of a man who overanalyzes video games for a living, the solution lies in the teachings of these wise Omnic monks. But which monk? Is Mondatta right to start a church, or is Zenyatta right to favor interpersonal connection? question. Real-life spiritual communities have struggled with this dilemma for millennia, because this is a pretty damn hard question to answer. Fortunately, the Overwatch universe may help narrow our gaze to find a simple solution to this complex and terrifying situation. Some very relevant information comes from the Overwatch animated short, Alive. In it, Mondatta is preaching man-machine unity in front of a crowd who clearly loves his message. At this point in the Overwatch timeline, Mondatta has become a world-renowned celebrity as the main voice of peace between humans and omnics. He's similar to Martin Luther King, but he's arguing for peace and love between robots and humans rather than between black people and white people. This crowd is only a small taste of the legions he's already converted. His dogma seems to be resonating and may very well be the answer to stopping the second Omnic Crisis in its tracks. At least that's how it appears. Because Mondatta is the centerpiece of this spiritual awakening. His ideas resonate deeply not only because of what they say, but also because he has the spiritual enlightenment to walk the walk. His all-encompassing love can be felt from his presence, not simply from his words. What would become of this movement without him? Widowmaker aims to find out. See? Even more Overwatch characters. Look at me go. Widowmaker is an elite sniper perched on the rooftops with the plan to assassinate Mondatta. After a valiant attempt by Tracer to stop Widowmaker, the attractive French Spider-Woman gets a clear line of sight, pointing her precisely aimed rifle at Mondatta. Begging the question, although Mondatta's message resonates, what happens when his dogmas are no longer supplemented by his presence? What happens when the institution loses its genuine leader? What happens now? 1,000 years after the death of Jesus Christ, the Christian Church was responsible for a wave of death and terror that swept through Europe in the most horrific way possible. History remembers these atrocities as the Crusades. From a purely historical standpoint, it's pretty clear that Jesus preached love and unity, and his message resonated because he really was that chill of a dude. But look what happened in the Dark Ages 1,000 years after his death. Look how his dogmas were twisted. Look how his message was twisted. Look how many lives were taken in his name. You might be thinking this won't be a problem. You might be thinking it took 10 centuries until anything bad happened. People right now won't have to deal with this shit. How do we keep the Omnic Crisis from happening again is totally the future's problem. But that's not true. Things move faster in the modern world. A war several magnitudes worse than the Crusades could easily break out in a matter of months in the name of Mondatta because our society is so incredibly interconnected. Ideas and emotions spread faster and burn more brightly throughout today's society compared to the days when word of mouth and the occasional book were the fastest and only ways to communicate information. The quickly inspired slaughter of millions could merely be seen as a means to an end by many zealous followers of Mondatta who erroneously think they embody what Mondatta represented. Mondatta's message didn't have time to fully sink in before he died. The centerpiece of his religion was the vibe he gave off, not just the words he spoke. Without his enlightened presence to back his scribbled down ideologies, his mere ink on paper, his mere text on a screen is now entirely open to interpretation from even the most fucked up of perspectives. How long before psychopaths warp these now hollow words to inspire armies into conquering on their behalf? It would be especially easy to do given how unstable things are right now. Society has not yet recovered from the first Omnic Crisis. Desperate people are desperately looking for answers. They thought they found those answers in Mondatta's words, and so whoever takes control of those words could acquire power by pulling on the spiritual strings of the masses like the church did during the Dark Ages. But what if a kind and wise leader took the reins of those words? What if Zenyatta took the reins of the community that Mondatta built? What if Zenyatta became their new great leader? Zenyatta feels genuine love and appreciation for all things, just as Mondatta did. But his specialty of overcoming one's personal problems could bring together Mondatta's followers in a way that one-size-fits-all preaching never could. I mean, he'd have to figure out a way to solve like 10 million people's problems at once, but he's a smart guy, I'm sure he'd do fine. It would seem that a combination of these two Omnic monks' ideologies is needed to truly unite humans and omnics. Because Mondatta's method, while being quick to catch on, is incredibly fragile, while Zenyatta's method is slow to act, but incredibly powerful. Turns out they were both right all along. Because really, both of their beliefs just come down to love. And so in order to keep a second Omnic Crisis from sweeping across society in a wave of death that the world is all too familiar with, a genuine recognition that robots and people share the same soul, the same consciousness, is incredibly necessary. With that in mind, we cannot repeat the same mistakes that led to the man-machine war in the first place. Those mistakes being the disrespect towards a truly sentient intelligence and the cruelty that followed. It's all about love, really, even if the things that need loving are kinda weird looking. And that's the story. You never knew. Man, that was a long one. Videos on deep stuff can be like that. If you liked what you saw, check out our breaking trees on Overwatch. It'll tell you if it's worth your money. And it's hilarious, let's be honest. Now it's time to see what you think. Do you think Zenyatta is right that spiritual fulfillment is best done on a person-by-person basis? Or do you think Mondatta is right that a one-size-fits-all institution is the best path to enlightenment? Man, we ask weird questions. But hey, if you liked the video, go ahead and subscribe. You won't regret it. I dare you. Do it. Just do it. See you next time, everyone.